So, hello, good morning or good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to this first part of our mini series on resilience and securities, which the City of Bonn has been organizing with our Center for Adult Learning and partner organizations. As you might know, UN organizations in Bonn are working for 30 years here this summer. Bonn is both a UNESCO learning city and maybe even more importantly, also a resilience hub under the Making Cities Resilience initiative of UNDRR, the UN Secretary General's Office for Disaster Risk Reductions. Since the beginning of our Resilience Hub activities, we have been pairing up with ICLEI in webinars. And today, we are very pleased to have a major European player also on board, which is ECMWF, the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, running the Copernicus satellite program, as you may all know. I'm very much looking forward to learning how weather data may support our awareness of risks and vulnerabilities in an urban context and thereby help us to scale up our own resilience. Cities around the world long understood the power of data and of collaboration with research, and I hope this webinar will give us all some practical insights. Thank you very much to ICLEI and ECMWF for setting up with us on this interesting seminar, and I'm wishing us all now very interesting 90 minutes. Thank you so much. I hand over.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and to the City of Bonn. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is David Jacome-Polit. I lead the Resilient Development Team at ICLEI World Secretariat here in Bonn as well. And we are, as mentioned, co-organizers of this very important webinar, particularly because of the topic that we are going to be discussing. We have a really nurtured, enriched panel with people not only working around collecting the data, making it available and making sense of it, but also others using it and actually providing measures and solutions on the ground to really give meaning to this very important resource. This session will start shortly with a short icebreaker. The survey will come later. Then we will have a keynote speaker from ECMWF, Carlo Bontempo. Then colleagues from the World Meteorological Organization will also share their insights through Sara Bassart. We have the presence here of the City of Buenos Aires, Argentina, with Milagros Sanchez, that is going to be sharing their experience. The United Nations University with Flavia Guerra will also be sharing again their insights. And finally, we will have a panel discussion among all the presenters, and we will be wrapping up with some concluding remarks. But before we go into the survey, I would like just to share one thought, something that I've been reflecting on and putting in writing, that I think it's quite relevant for today's session, because of the meaning, again, or the importance of information, but also the question of what we do with it. And so basically what I want to share is the following. Decisions about what is measured, whose risks are rendered visible, which losses remain externalized, and how resources are reallocated shape our city's trajectories. Therefore, democratizing information flows through transparent data governance participatory monitoring and community-controlled knowledge production constitutes redistribution of epistemic power, not merely a technical enhancement. I think this gives meaning, what I just said gives meaning to the importance of this topic and the relevance of all the colleagues here supporting us and sharing with generosity their thoughts on this. To my colleagues with the tech support, maybe we want to go with a short icebreaker in the Zoom survey. We have a very first question, which is we wanna know, who do we have here with us? Where in the world are you coming from? Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, Oceania, or Australia? Of course, you can access to the survey questions through the Menti QR code. And if not possible, you have the number code below. And great, we already have responses coming in, people from Germany, Denmark, Turkey, Italia, so far very Europe-centered, Argentina, great, Ukraine, Spain. I believe we can move to the second question. Which sector do you represent? Are you representing a local government, the academia, NGO, an international organization, or the private sector? Again, you have the QR code on your right side and the numerical code as well. Quite a bit from the academia and NGOs sectors. We have a member from a city council, which is great. And I think we can move to the third question. And we would like to hear from you, which extreme weather event is the most relevant in your context? Perfect. Thank you very much. We might want to keep it open just in case there are still responses coming in. We are a bit ahead of a schedule, which is fine. Usually these type of sessions take a little bit longer. So we might use this time in the best way possible, which is by listening to our experts and having these conversations. I would like to then go and present our first speaker keynote from ECMWF, Carlo Buontempo, who is going to provide us with an overview and introduction of the organization and its work. The floor is all yours, Carlo, for the next 20 minutes. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. A pleasure to be with you this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, depending where you are on the globe. I will try to share my slides, which is always interesting, but I'm convinced I will succeed. Let me see. So if I do this and then this. Do you see in presentation mode? Wrong slide.
Yes.
Do you?
Yes, we see it.
Fantastic. Great. So good afternoon. I'm Carlo Bontempo. I'm the director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service at ICNWF. I will tell you more about both these acronyms, so to speak, and start. Both of them quite difficult to be fair to pronounce, but I will try to get into the nitty-gritty of what they are and what we do. But before I do that, I thought it was nice just to tell you why I think this matters to you, because in a sense, climate change affects all of us and affects all activities in society, but has long been believed that climate change will affect city, regions, local community more directly first in a more evident way. And there is an ongoing discussion in the adaptation community on whether all adaptation decisions are local or whether some adaptation decision can actually be global. But for sure, there are a number, I would say a large number of adaptation decisions that are fundamentally local, which means that information on the impact, information on the vulnerability, on the exposure at the local level can drive action even without the need of an international agreement, as you would in the case of a mitigation kind of setting. But when you look at climate change is first and foremost a global problem. So there is this element of mismatch, if you want. And the last point I want to make is that we are not living, or at least not anymore, living in a world where the lack of data is the bottleneck. We have plenty of data, as I will show you in a minute, and it's all about making this data usable, integrating this data, use it in the best possible way. And in that, I do think that the climate resilience is as much as a data challenge as it is an engineering or policy challenge. So some of you may have seen this plot, which we published just slightly over a month ago, come out of the Global Climate Highlight, which is one of our annual publications, and shows the distribution of anomaly of global temperature as a function of time. Is a very beautiful graphics, in my opinion, but aside the aesthetic element, it contains an element of truth, which I think we need to grapple with. And it's the fact that if you look at the histogram of the last year, of 2025, that's entirely to the right of that zero line. That's the anomaly over the 1991 to 2020 period, which means that the anomaly of any day this year was warmer than the anomaly of any days in the decade I was born. So it's a way of saying we live in a fundamentally different climate, and this affects all of us. And this is the source of all that follow, all the work we are doing is how to use this information in the best possible way. So I promised to tell you a bit more about who we are and what we do. So let me do that. ECNWF, which, as I said, is a difficult acronym, stands for European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. We turned 50 just a few weeks ago, in last year. And you see the picture on the left. This was the moment of the signature of our charter, international charter as an international organization. And the one you see on the right is, with all the little flags, is our council, where the representative of all our member states sit together and make the executive decision about the future of the center. We have a strong basis in Europe. We are a European organization, but our member state, as you can see also from the flag, do not coincide one-to-one with the member state of the European Union as such. There is a very large overlap, but we are different organizations. We are not directly linked to one another. And the reason, the raison d'être of ICNWF was to tackle those problems which no nation in isolation could tackle. And in the 70s, when we were born, this was mostly weather prediction, especially for week 2, which at that time was an incredible and unsurmountable problem. Over the years, we grew to become one of the reference points for weather prediction anywhere on the globe. And interestingly, one that our colleagues and friends on the other side of the Atlantic look with envy at. So is one of these elements of European excellence to some extent. But I would like to argue that we have also become the engine of global weather intelligence. So climate information is becoming more and more important for society. And this means that we need to transform the way in which we access, we use, and we react to the data that we are generating. ICNWF is the entities that implement on the behalf of the European Commission, in this case, one of the 6 services of Copernicus. Copernicus is the Earth observation program of the European Union, and as you will see in a minute, is divided into a space component and in a service component that we look after. But I just want to say we have 3 sites in Europe as ICNWF. One is Reading, where our headquarters is based in the UK. One is Bologna, where our supercomputer sits and where all our calculations are being done. And the third one is Bonn, where actually I'm based, and most of the people working on climate nowadays are based. You have the website at the bottom if you're interested to learn more about what we do. So I was mentioning Copernicus. Copernicus is this large European project, or program rather, on Earth observation. The space component is designed to design satellites, launch satellites, retrieve the data from those satellites. And then there is a service component. And as you can see, the service component is structured over 6 services, thematic services, marine, land, security, emergency, and atmospheric monitoring and climate change. The last 2 of which are implemented on behalf of the Commission by the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecast. Something really important to stress is that all the data and tools and software that we produced actually are open and free. Anyone can use those anywhere on the planet for any sort of application, this being research, commercial, or otherwise. And as ICNWF, we also play a role in the implementation of the emergency management service that is looked after by the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. And in a sense, this exercise, first and foremost, about weather predictions over the last 50 years, and more recently with the climate change, made us one of the probably biggest archive of meteorological information anywhere on the globe. So our archive, which are largely magnetic tapes stored in a former factory at the outskirts of Bologna, is now of the order of 1 exabyte. So if you're not paying attention at school about suffixes for big numbers, exabyte is a 1 followed by 18 zeros. So it's a billion of billions. It's an enormous amount of data. So when I was saying data is no longer the bottleneck, I really meant it. We have an enormous, gigantic amount of data. And it's not a matter of lack of data. It's more a matter of making sense of this in an efficient way. So we not only generate and archive data, but we try to make sense of this data and try to support society in the transformation of this data towards more concrete solutions. So if you want in just a picture, try to imagine what this means. It means that every single day, day in, day out, we take all sorts of observation coming from satellites, coming from radiosonde balloons, coming from ground stations or oceanographic buoys, and we assimilate those. We gather those in our supercomputer in Bologna, and we transform this. We transform this in insight that can be used by energy practitioners, can be used by people working in finance, more and more so, energy, water, risk managers, and so on and so forth. And actually, this is an operation that we do and is funded by the European Commission. But if you look at the economic value of what we generate, we believe that the return on the investment, public investment in this service, actually is more than repaid. Really being super conservative in our effort, we believe that we generate roughly 10 euros per euro invested in the program. So it's a very significant investment, return on investment for society. This is one example of, if you want, summarizing all we do. But if you want to get a bit more specific, then you can start looking at what does it mean in practice. And you can do it by looking at the observation. So satellites are this fantastic, wonderful technology that allow us to monitor things we cannot measure directly. So if you look at the Southern Ocean, if you look at the Antarctic continent, well, before the 70s, that is normally considered, or late 70s actually, that is normally considered the beginning of the satellite era, we didn't really have much information because there are very few people living there and there are not many weather stations. So this meant, among other things, that the quality of weather forecast in the Southern Hemisphere and the Southern Ocean specifically was much lower than the quality of weather forecast in the Northern Hemisphere. But it also meant that we couldn't really assess the extent of sea ice. So having this information about the planet allow us to monitor what's happening in real time. And what you're seeing in this animation is the spectacular decrease in sea ice that we've seen in around Antarctica in 2023. But we can do much more than that, because the technology that we have developed to predict the weather, which is our core business, can actually be used to regenerate the weather of the past, even in the periods for which we don't have satellite. So this is an example of something that may look a bit like a satellite image, but is actually from 1941, 15th of February, 1941 at 2 in the afternoon. So our ability to recreate the weather of the past, the climate of the past, or replay, in this case, the Hurricane Katrina event in the US, gives us the possibility of seeing how the variables affecting our everyday life can actually be used to assess our risk, to assess our vulnerability. We do this in the past, but we do this also in the future. So it's not just the observation or this fancy reconstruction of the past climate. It's also about what will happen next. This is an example of work we have done in support of the IPCC, developing the Copernicus Atlas that pick up from the IPCC work on the Atlas. All is available. You can follow the link if you're interested and play with it. But this gives the possibility of analyzing how any climate variable will change in any part of the world from now until the end of the century. This constantly kept up to date. So this, in a sense, is still about the data, but as I was mentioning, is becoming more and more a matter of contextualizing and transforming this data into something that makes sense. One of the efforts we do in this space is in the context of the European State of the Climate Report that has a lot of effort, see a lot of effort getting into it from not only from ECNWF, but from hundreds of scientists all over Europe, from university, National Met Services, research institution, and so on and so forth. And this is a very rich data set and report that contains a number of interactive infographic. In this case, you see the reduction, massive reduction in some case, of glaciers in the European mountains over the years. That clearly this has a significant impact for local biodiversity, for weather patterns, for water resources, and so on and so forth. But we can also, the nature of what we do allow us also to be monitoring these changes in near real time. This is an example of the flooding that we've seen across Europe in 2024. So Storm Boris affected most of the European, Central European countries in the autumn, dropping a lot of water and flooding, even significantly a good part of that region. Valencia in Spain, so one of the worst flooding in Europe in recent years. And the fact that we can provide this information very soon after the event in a coherent fashion actually add to the ecosystem. And we do even more. So this is an example of an application based on the web. And again, you can follow the link or scan the QR code if you want to play with it, that provide information on thermal stress, on heat stress, effectively. And now the heat stress has changed over the recent past and will change, well, really as changed over the recent past than future projections anywhere on the globe, and is updated up to real time. So why all of this is relevant, and why I'm giving this presentation to you? Well, because you can imagine this information actually becoming more and more important when you design resilient infrastructure, when you think in terms of urban planning or zoning for climate risk in cities or in local communities. So which data should we use? And the idea of having a service such as Copernicus Climate Change Service that provide an authoritative source of information as an operational task, not as a research effort, day in, day out, we believe can support that process. So you see the same for risk management, for water allocation, or for heat action plans. There are so many actions that can be taken at regional and local level that require trustworthy data that needs to be generated, curated, and distributed as a public good, not as a research endeavor. So maybe it's worth saying what we are not on top of what we are. So this is not a turnkey solution. We are not a consultancy nor a decision maker. We are not taking the decision for you or for the local administration, nor we are replacing national or regional climate services. But we have this combination of data, insight, information, and infrastructure that can power what is being done at the regional level. And in a sense, one of the challenges I think we will see more and more in the next few years is the ability to develop a chain connecting the provision of this data as a public good to the decision on the ground. So it's an ecosystem that needs to work together, going from the global infrastructure, and I would put ECNWF in that bucket, national met services or climate services, hydrological agencies, regional agency, cities of different dimension. You know, big cities have different challenges than small cities, and ultimately citizens. So I think finding a mechanism to make this landscape work together efficiently, this ecosystem really work together efficiently, is one of the major tasks we face. Clearly, we cannot do this alone. It's not something that ECNWF or C3S can even consider doing in isolation. We rely entirely on you. We rely on the local communities, on the regional administration, the national administration, on the citizen, effectively. And not only to use this data and contextualize it, something that we will never be able to do, but also to provide feedbacks, to provide requirement to us. We can only develop our service, develop the information we put together, the observation, the insights, the tools, if we get these detailed requirement, use cases, and needs. And because of that, we have started a couple of years ago now a program of national collaboration where we really proactively engage with national entities in the exchange of not only data and information, but also needs, requirement, and insight. And you're very welcome to reach out to us through our user support pages, through our national collaboration offices, and provide your feedbacks. And this is something that keeps us up to date and attuned with the need on the ground. So I stop here just to maybe to end with a bit of a mantra, if you want. Adaptation is not a data set. I don't think that what we do is adaptation per se, because adaptation is fundamentally a societal capability. But we do exist to make that capability possible everywhere on the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for this presentation, for providing all for providing us an overview on what exactly your organization offers, what the platform offers to different levels of governments, but also to communities. And I have to agree with you. It's really difficult to adapt if you don't know exactly what's going on. You need the data and you need the information in order to make best and better decisions. We are doing great with time. Then I would like to invite Dr. Sarah Bassart from the World Meteorological Organization. And she is going to speak about how can that organization help with preventing and managing disasters. Where do you see greatest needs or opportunities for local governments in improving risk data governance? And the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. I hope that you can see my screen in full presentation mode and listen to me. Yeah, okay, perfect. Maybe I don't fulfill all the items that you mentioned now in the introduction, but I hope that at least you will know better what WMO is taking care in these conversations on urban resilience. As you may know, one of the important things is that we know that more than 50% of the population is living in cities, and the projections say that in 2050 is about 70% of the population will live in cities. In cities, we have people, but also infrastructures and economic assets like some industries and industries. You can also think in solar energy plants, for example. But also we have the issue that there is an increased exposure to heat waves, floods, storms, but also air pollution, as Carlo mentioned before, and this is connected with changes in climate and how this climate change is amplifying certain hazards that we identified in cities. When we think in urban resilience, there are different components, but one of the things were the Met services that are the members that are coordinated under WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, is more connected with climate and disaster risk readiness, which is mostly how we can prevent the impact of the hazards, natural hazards in that case, and how to prepare the cities for future climate impacts. And here is the conversation between present time weather and climate, and how this information has to be used by different decision makers to improve and adapt the cities to this enhanced risk. And a good example in these conversations connected with climate and air pollution, for example, and heat is wildfires. We know that all projections in IPCC is telling us that if the temperatures is going up, this will increase the risk of fires. And the estimation said that probably if we don't reduce the temperatures, the increment of temperatures of 2 degrees, it is projected an increase of 30-35% of burn areas, and also an increased frequency of 20%, which means that this is a hazard that most of the cities are suffering nowadays. Then here is the component between the conversation between weather, present time, and climate, how the changing climate are increasing the risk of fires, but the fires are affecting you in your daily life. And if the fire happens close to a city, then it's a risk for the city, and it's taking part this urban resilience planning. And what is doing the World Meteorological Organization, just to let you know, is the United Nations agency specialized in weather, climate, and water. For the reason these conversations between climate impacts in present time are important for us. It is supported by 193 members, meaning countries, and in that case, the countries are represented by Met services. We are coordinating the work of more than 300,000 national experts from meteorological and hydrological services, but also academia, private sector. And we are co-founder and host agency of the IPCC. What is unique in WMO is that we have a very established structure in which science and innovation, through the 3 research programs hosted by WMO on climate, weather, and air pollution, atmospheric composition, are connected with the more operational activities under WMO, that is the data exchange, meaning observations, forecastings, and predictions, but also the development and support of climate services, disaster risk reduction, and public services. And here in public services, you can consider, for example, support the health sector. And in these conversations, obviously, where the people is living is mostly in cities, goes into the discussion this concept of integrated urban services. That is mostly how to integrate all this information from different scales and special representativities, how we can integrate for supporting decisions, and how we can do this feedback, constant feedback, as Carlo mentioned in his presentation, how the users can provide us feedback on the need of information and how we can integrate all these elements from monitoring, from predictions, from socioeconomic information in a way that someone can take a decision. And the part of the input information on this system is where WMO and the Met services are playing a role. And the Met services, you can imagine that also ECNWF is inside these discussions. Just to let you know, integrated urban service concept is not restricted to urban microscales or urban microscales, meaning we can integrate global and regional information to support the city decision, but also in scales of time, we can think in weather and climate and how to integrate this in a way that someone can take a decision and do a planning. Also, in the case of the integration, it's important to consider that we want to support the decisions of the cities, and here is important to consider the multi-hazards. And the clear example is when we have a heat wave, usually there is an increase of air pollution, and this is increasing the risk on your health. Then to have all the elements together will help the health sector in that case to take a better decision because they will have a more complete picture of the situation. And this is what we are promoting. We are trying to collect all the information available from the different providers, Med services, international organizations as ECNWF, and to redesign this input information in impact models that it's representing the priority hazards like heat, flooding, drought in the survey. Most of them appears. And then to transform these hazards in something applicable to the different sectors, which is the component in which you can have in your co-design people from the different sectors that can help you to really design the best application tailored product, which is basically the risk maps. And in this case, when we think in one of the potential products that you can think is the early warning systems, this is more connected with disaster risk reduction, is emergency protection services, for example. And WMO is coordinating this big initiative that is Early Warnings for All, that is trying to support that all the countries around the world will have established well early warning systems. In this case, you have to be aware that the scheming of these early warning systems, we have always a preparedness and response phase, which is more connected with climate products, and also the more present things that are happening, that are the observations, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting, which is more connected with the weather scales. Then the challenge here is to combine these two elements in a way that someone can take a decision or to prepare the season in advance. And this is the kind of things that we are discussing at WMO level. We have different types of products, different types of sets of products. You can think that in some cases we are only having meteorological information, like in the case of climate projections and predictions. But also in the case of air pollution, we have more limited information, and still we don't have established products that can give you subseasonal or seasonal information about air pollution. But we can try to derive information from climate predictions to establish a risk of fires, air pollution connected with the smoke, for example. And also we need to connect the scales and the uncertainties. We have to provide to the users what is the uncertainty when you connect all these scales. Then this is another level of discussions that we are keeping with the experts and also with the users. And of course, there is the spatial resolution. When we integrate information, we know that the city level needs, in some cases, this is an example of Barcelona, that you define the street level to define better the traffic, because you need to take decisions based on peaks of pollution and then reduction of traffic and to cut some streets maybe. Then there are things that needs to be aligned and well understood when you are combining the information. And how is the representativity of the information that you are using for taking your decision? In this case, this study from Barcelona emphasized that when you are in a traffic station, is that one that you can see here, and this one that you can see here is these two sides that are closer to the traffic. When you have a very high resolution, the peaks are better reproduced. This is important when you are doing this kind of decisions based on air pollution and traffic management, for example. But also we are doing some work on urban emissions. And in this case, I want to mention one initiative in WMO that is called IGIS, Integrated Global Greenhouse Gas Information System, that is basically looking for a framework for the provision of systematic services to support their greenhouse gas emission reduction ambitions. And the main pillar of this exercise is to build a consistent framework of work to report emissions. And in that case, you can find in WMO guidelines on how to report and how to establish the emissions per city, for example, for specific pollutants connected with greenhouse gases. And also we have some research, specific research and innovation projects. In that case, you can see two is the Urban Predict project that is trying to do this shameless study between climate and weather products in that case, and also the multi-hazard component, how heat, air pollution can be interconnected, and we have to be aware about this cascade effect. But also we are integrated in our discussions how AI, artificial intelligence techniques, can help us to really promote and advance in the products that we can provide for a more sustainable urban systems and climate resilience. And with that, I think that I took all my time, and just I want to advertise that we have a symposium in April in Geneva. It's connected with the Global Atmosphere Watch program that is focusing on air pollution. And of course, urban activities are in the agenda of the event. And with that, thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Much appreciated your presentation. Again, the overview of the services that you guys offer and how both cities and communities can be better prepared by using all of these resources. We are still within time, but then I would like to move quickly to South America with Milagros Sanchez from the City of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And she's going to be sharing with us an example where integrating hazard and vulnerability data led to a different or even better policy decision. You have 7 minutes from this point onwards, Milagros. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I will be sharing some insights on the evidence-based climate policy for heat in the case of the City of Buenos Aires. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in 2020, we elaborate a climate risk analysis where we can see how we go from hazard to climate risk. In this case, we are seeing the future heat waves risk for population from the City of Buenos Aires. But if we take a closer look and go to the next slide, we can see how was that climate risk assessed. If we ask ourselves that question, we will get some kind of this answer. We first of all taking care what are the heat wave hazard looking in the city of Buenos Aires. We can see that on the left slide, the left image, sorry. Can you go back from the, thank you very much. We can see how the heat wave hazard looks like in a future in the city of Buenos Aires, and we can see that it looks all the same. But if we take into account the population vulnerability to heat waves, there we can see a huge difference. Everything, of course, taking care of the exposure to the hazard in order to make the risk happen. We share information in case of hazard multiplied by exposure and vulnerability, how the IPCC takes into account. So if you look at these two images and we go to the other slide and we, in that case, go back to the risk, we can see that the risk, the result, the climate risk looks more alike to the vulnerability than to the hazard itself. So what does that give us into account is we need to take note that vulnerability in this case and exposure are central to risk. So with this information, we start asking ourselves more questions on how to look into this information and how to construct adaptation to climate change, particularly to the hazard of urban heat. So in the next slide, we can see how we started asking ourselves how to take this analysis a little bit further. We started asking some of these questions. What factors should we consider to better understand heat vulnerability? What effect does green infrastructure have in regulating high temperatures? What factors must we consider to effectively address heat vulnerability? Well, in order to start answering ourselves one of these questions, we start working close by different stakeholders of the city. Here I see some of them connected. We work a lot with the Territorial Data Management Office in order to ask, for example, the second questions. If we go to the next slide, we can share some information about it. So we work together in order to see what was the role of the green infrastructure in order to regulate high temperatures. We can see here at the right of the PowerPoint an image of the city of Buenos Aires where it represents some sector, the one that we see with the two other images. This is a neighborhood called Barrio 20, which is a low-income neighborhood, neighborhood in where we see in these two images that on the left side we have the vegetation represent with green colors the side of this neighborhood. We have a little bit more vegetation, but on the right side, we can see the temperature. And we can see here how there seems to be an excess in between the vegetation and the land self temperature in order to regulate it. So we took a little bit more into account what we could do to see more information, particularly in this neighborhood. So I would like to share a little bit of the case study on the next slide. So we took into account that we needed more information and we needed to do this work with another stakeholders. So we work together and we keep working in this ICLEI project that considers also another stakeholders, not only government ones, but we start taking measurements on temperature and humidity, monitoring these neighborhoods. And by doing so, we also consider the role of the vegetation in regulating overheat, because this project also takes into account adding infrastructure, green infrastructure into the neighborhood. So this is some part of the projects that we were taking into account and to going further with the information that we can congregate, and also doing so by integrating different stakeholders working together as a city as a whole, because as I previously mentioned, we work together particularly with different areas, also very by hand with the territorial data management. But we need also to take into account the society as itself and the community to make this data gathering and response to work. So in the next slide, I would like to share some evidence embedding evidence in the strategic climate planning to address heat that we're taking nowadays with some of these experiences that we have in the past. So today, with information that we have in the last 5 years, at least, gather and talk about, we decided to update the climate risk analysis, but taking into account a social vulnerability to disasters in order to have more information about it and to be really precise, the most precise that we can with the data in order to take it into account to address the different hazards that we have in the city, but particularly in this case, I would like to share with you the information from urban heat. Also, by doing so and taking into account the process that we have in administration, the temperature information and gathering more and working together with different stakeholders, we are working on integrating the temperature and humidity monitoring into the climate action plan that nowadays we are working on. And one thing else that we'd like to share, we are developing the heat action plan in order to assess climate risk from extreme heat. So in a matter of saying, we are really working on trying to make public policy from data that we are gathering and still collecting by the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Milagros. And it was great to see how Buenos Aires is using this data. And it's true. If you look at a map only from a hazard perspective, that has one set of colors, but if you bring in socioeconomic vulnerability, that landscape changes completely. And if you keep even selecting more layers there, for example, if you give it a gender lens, then it will change even further. And this is important to take into account. So data is important, necessary from a hazard and meteorological perspective, but also from a vulnerability perspective. After the next presentation, we will be offering time for Carlo and other speakers if there are to respond to some of the questions on the chat, and then we can also move to the questions that we had prepared for the panel. But next, we have Dr. Flavia Guerra from the United Nations University, and she's going to discuss the limitations of large-scale or global climate datasets, and how cities can complement this with either local knowledge or ground truth data. Flavia, the next 7 minutes are all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. It's great to see Milagros on the panel. It was a coincidence. I'm also going to tell you a little bit more about Buenos Aires and the Barrio 20 case, but from a slightly different perspective. So I hope you still find it interesting. So yes, I'm Flavia Guerra. I'm a senior researcher with the Urban Futures and Sustainability Transformation team at the UN University, the Institute for Environment and Human Security, that is also based here in Bonn. I have the great easier job because all of my panelists have sort of already emphasized the importance of large-scale and global weather and climate datasets. And for us scientists, these datasets and this type of data really helps us track trends and detect extremes and understand long-term changes. So the IPCC reports, the IPCC scenarios, they're really based on this type of data because, like it has been said, and we all know, climate change is global, but climate risk is also very profoundly local. And we saw now with Milagros' presentation that especially vulnerability and exposure, it's very concentrated in cities. But if cities rely exclusively on these large-scale data sets, they really risk overlooking and potentially even reinforcing certain inequalities within their cities. So I will highlight 3 key limitations of large-scale data sets, but also provide some 4 recommendations on how we can complement these. And I think integration is really the core word here that I think everyone has mentioned so far. If we move on to the next slide, you will see that we are working on a paper. So most of what I will share with you is based on preliminary findings of this paper that is based on the microsensor network that is installed in Barrio that Milagros told you a little bit about. And this has been installed in the context of the ICLEI-funded Transformative Urban Coalitions project. So we at UNU are working very closely with the City of Buenos Aires, but also other partners, including IID America Latina. So the first limitation, I think it becomes very clear when looking at our colleagues' presentations, is the spatial resolution issue, right? So official meteorological networks of national meteorological services, they are designed to monitor weather at citywide and regional scale usually. So in Buenos Aires, these stations, they are scarce. They are mostly located in airports and parks. And this really means that some highly dense and low-income informal settlements, in this case, might not be contemplated. So it's from this that we found the need and installed a microsensor network in Barrio to track air temperature and humidity data. And this has been in place for over 2 years. So we're analyzing data from this network and comparing it with one of the city's official meteorological stations, which is the Buenos Aires Central Observatory. But you can see I'm not really good with maps, and we're still in the drafting stage for our paper. But the map on the left is just a simple representation of the distance between this official, the Buenos Aires Central Observatory, which is more to the north center of the city, to Barrio which is the informal settlement where we have the microsensors. So it's even over 10 kilometers away. And so we didn't necessarily find a contradiction in the data, but there's definitely differences in scale. So we noticed that Barrio is systematically higher and more persistent exposure to extreme heat. There are some sites within Barrio you see the map on the right, that accumulate substantially more hours above extreme thresholds when compared to the official station. And also there's significant variability within the neighborhood. So even if we just had one official sensor there, it would probably not be enough. So a single citywide reference point cannot really represent the lived realities of different neighborhoods. And also because heat exposure is very varied, right? So it's not evenly distributed within the city. So microclimates are shaped by different factors. You have vegetation cover, shading, building density, materials, which vary across the city and also across neighborhoods within the city. And it's okay because by design, this global city scale, national scale monitoring and data sets, they're not intended to resolve these microscale differences, but it's important that they are identified and they're considered in urban resilience planning. So the second limitation relates to climate indices. So things like TX90, tropical nights, extreme heat indexes. These are standardized metrics used globally to track the frequency and intensity of heat extremes. They're very much used in the IPCC. They're valuable for like regional, national climate monitoring, and we try to apply them to our context. And we found that there are some shortcomings there because dense informal settlements, the conditions vary a lot. There's limited ventilation that intensifies thermal stress indoors. There's metal roofs that also trap nighttime heat. There's extreme shading from trees and other greenery that can lower daytime temperature peaks. But this doesn't mean that applying these indices in this context is not useful. It's definitely useful, but maybe their interpretation and the interpretation of the results and the thresholds all of this that come out, they need to be taken with a grain of salt, right? To make sure that we don't underestimate risks in these localized hotspots, we don't misidentify priority areas, and also we don't overlook micro-scale climate shelters that can be available in certain neighborhoods. So this relates to the third limitation, that is then that the social and lived dimensions are rarely captured by these global national scale data sets. So they're usually these climate data sets, they measure things like temperature and humidity, precipitation, and other similar factors. So things like housing quality, indoor exposure, access to cooling, adaptive capacity, even perceived heat stress are not usually captured. And so we found that in Barrio Vente, the least vegetated and most infrastructure dense areas consistently emerged as thermal hotspots. And you see it on the map. So the hotspot, the brighter red on the right, it's actually the local sports center. And the one on the left is actually the local health center. And we found these hotspots through the data. But when we talked to the residents, they already knew that these areas during heat waves are unbearable. And so they also know, if we talk to them, which streets are more likely to flood during heavy rainfalls. So integrating local knowledge and lived experience with climate data sets would really be the way to go for equitable urban resilience strategies. So this links me then to the next slide, which is the recommendation. So what can we do about this? What can cities do to really complement where other data sets fall short? So fine scale monitoring, so low cost municipal sensor networks, for example, but making sure that we have careful placement protocols for the sensors. So I've been learning this as we write the paper. There's a lot of technicalities that we need to adhere to when placing the sensors themselves to make sure that the data is good and comparable to the data from official stations. Including citizen science approaches can also be interesting. So the sensor network that was installed in Barrio Vente is actually managed by residents and the community in collaboration with municipal government teams, researchers, local researchers, and local NGOs, just to make sure, like I said, that the methodological rigor is still there and we can compare quality data. The third recommendation, very important, making sure that the monitoring is linked to action. So using data to identify the thermal hotspots as well as potential climate shelters, and then prioritize targeted place-based interventions, for example, nature-based solutions. IID America Latina, together with local partners, they've put together this manual for climate adaptation in low-income neighborhoods. So that's a very interesting resource for other communities. And finally, also looking at the other side of the equation, making sure we also try to evolve climate metrics. This does not mean replacing global standards, indices, data sets, but making sure that they are complemented with more locally led data. And then the interpretation of the results is also placed in the contexts where we want to intervene and make decisions about. So, for example, the colleague spoke about early warning systems. If the thresholds for early warning should even be the same for informal settlements and in the formal city, considering that we saw that there's more exposure and they go through more days with heat, extreme heat temperatures. So I think I wanted to end with climate justice really begins where people live. And then the next slide is really, we're writing the paper on this. Hopefully it will be out soon. It will be open access. But in the meantime, feel free to reach out to us, or we have the project website, and take a look at the project outputs that we already have out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Flavia. From your presentation, I think I would just like to take and leave everyone with one of your last statements. Climate action starts where people are actually located, where they live, and that has to be very much understood in those contexts. are usually where we have the least data and where we have to make more effort to bring clarity. So thank you for that. I have a question for all the panelists, but I do not want to take the risk of leaving out a couple of questions from the audience to our panelists. So the first thing I would like to do is maybe allow you, Carlo, to take a few minutes to respond to the questions that you have that are for you on the chat. Then I will go for Milagros, and there is also one for Flavia, but maybe first to you, Carlo.
Yes, I can be very, very quick and time efficient in the sense that I responded to most of the question already in the chat. Basically, I guess the strength of our collaboration with SMEs and small companies is in the open and free data policy. And I mean, clearly, as we are implementing the program through open competitive tender, they can maybe have a look at what we are opening, but in terms of collaboration, I guess, and building upon our data, the best entry point is probably our user support. So if you want to know what the data is, how to use it, how to use the API, don't hesitate to reach out to us or to look at the forum. So that's in a nutshell. Happy to expand later if there is time.
Thank you very much, Carlo. We have one question for Milagros, and the question is, how do your vulnerability assessments inform day-to-day public health efforts? Do you share these assessments or coordinate with hospitals or other public health institutions? And then there's a thing note after that.
Thank you for the question. Well, nowadays we're working a lot together with the public sector of the city. We are taking into account to plan together some climate actions regarding to have a health sector prepare for heat. So in order to do so, we are seeing the information that we nowadays have together and how we can work towards a city that is prepared because of the heat waves that are coming and already occurring, and also the street heat that, as Flavia mentioned, is not the same perceived in the whole city. So nowadays we are working together with them in order to make some climate actions and to take them into the planification of the next 5 years. So that's the case of the city. And in a matter of sense of vulnerability, we are also taking into account that the city has a lot of differences and not every social sector, every city site is the same, and we need to take into account in order to make the planification the more efficient to address urban heat in our adaptation measurements.
Thank you very much, Milagros, for that answer. There is one question for Flavia, but then Flavia is flagging that you might be better positioned to answer that question. Maybe I would allow you, maybe you want to take that one first, Milagros, and then Flavia can expand if needed afterwards. But the question is, do you know if, in terms of heat and how air circulation is taken into account, and what measures are in place to preserve fresh air corridors, allowing for air circulation? For you, Milagros.
I'm sorry, I thought it was for Flavia. Yes, into informal settlements, as Flavia mentioned, it is a key point to take into account the infrastructure of these spots because circulation of air is something that's really challenging in order to, not only for heat, also we have seen that low temperatures are perceived differently in these informal settlements. In the past few years, there has been a lot of work done by the city to make the informal settlements a part of the formal city. And by doing so, they were starting to open up streets and to make the infrastructure perceived as the formal city, and by doing so, it has been different by the space taken into account, but it's something that it's not complete, and by now there are still, as in Barrio 20, still a lot of places where it's a huge challenge to tackle the infrastructure and the air diffusion and the corridors to be taken in. So that's something that from an infrastructure taking place, it's a challenge, but something that we are also exploring and thinking about is how by an adaptation-based ecosystems measurement, you can also start thinking about how ventilation, it could be something to help to cool down the city. So it's really interesting to not only for informal settlements, but also for the city as a whole to take into account ventilation as an asset to add in order to fight urban heat.
Perfect, Milagros. Thank you very much. Anything that you would like to add, Flavia, to what Milagros just mentioned?
It was perfect. Thank you, Milagros.
Great. Then I know there are still questions coming in for our panelists, but there is one question that was, let's say, pre-agreed beforehand or agreed beforehand that I would like to put forward to all of you to see what your thoughts are on this particular point. Then I would like to start with Sara, not to put you on the spot, but we heard your presentation, and it'll be great to hear from you. Which kind of partnerships and collaborations would you recommend cities and local governments to take in this integrative path in terms of using this data and information? Anything that comes up right now from the top of your head?
The discussion is different if you think in Europe or Americas or Asia, because the governance in the cities, not always med services are having the mandate over the cities to launch warnings or cities sometimes have their own governance. Then here the important thing is to understand the city. Each city is having their own relations in terms of governance with the Environmental Protection Agency, with the health ministers, with hospitals, with emergency sectors. And this is the big challenge here, probably, is to understand how is the workflow of data and who is the end user that needs to receive all this information. There is no single answer, to this question. Yeah.
The answer, of course, varies from country to country and quite likely from city to city as well. Thank you very much, Sara. Flavia, any thoughts on this particular question, collaborations, partnerships that you recommend for cities to take this integrative path?
Well, I'm gonna say partner with researchers, partner with citizens, and this answers a little bit the question of someone, where to start. I think the municipal government, in this case, it's the team with territorial data management has been such a big help in helping us make sense of the data and also all the technicalities surrounding the meteorological stations and situation in the city of Buenos Aires. Also local NGOs, because they know the communities that might need it the most, because you usually need to start somewhere. You can start with the pilot and then see how it works. And then researchers usually know where to get like the norms and get all of that right. For sure, the World Meteorological Organization They have lots of documents on norms, where to place the sensors, what type of sensors, what's the height. So all of these things. Try to put together a core team of researchers, municipal government, local NGOs, and go from there and talk to the citizens.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and also based on what you were saying before, communities, for example, would come to mind in terms of important partnerships, especially where there's lack of data. Then I would like to look back to you, Carlo, and see if you have any recommendation from your perspective.
In general, collaboration.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking actually when the other were answering, and I clearly agree with what has been said. I guess something that I see emerging more and more often is to start from the issues. The data, we can make the data available, we can generate the data, we can look into it, but it's not necessarily the best starting point. The best starting point is asking, what is the issue? What is the problem? What will be the issue in the future? And develop together a storyline. What is the story we are looking into? I think that's, for me, very powerful as a tool. Not as a scientist, as a national met organization, as a university, as Copernicus, WMO, we can support that story with data, with information, with modeling, but it's not necessarily the best starting point. So as a core of collaboration, I think collaborating on identifying the issues and defining the storylines, I think is probably a good starting point.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Back to you, Milagros. What type of partnerships would you like to see in order to, take this integrative path from the perspective of the city of Buenos Aires? Did you hear me, Milagros?
I'm sorry, I missed you. Could you repeat, please? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The question is, from your perspective, what type of partnerships and collaborations would you recommend to other cities or to your own city in terms of being part of this integrative path? Who would you like to partner, or in your experience, who is important to partner with?
I think, first of all, what really resolved to us was to partner with the city itself, like to start working every state government area together in order to fulfill our expectations to get where we want to be. We need, as government stakeholders, work together. That's really important to get our targets aligned and to make efforts to get to a good port, as we say. But also, I believe what I said, also researchers are really, really helpful. Work with universities, we work with NGOs, interact with different, in this case, local government. We have been having really good insights with another city, the city of Rosario, in this same project. And I think that's really helpful in order to not only try to conduct to get to your targets, but as well gather the information that you need with every stakeholder that is willing to participate and to make the citizens part of the diagnosis in order to get together to a solution. That's something that we try to do, to make them participate in different stages of our planning to make it a part of what we are thinking as a solution for the city, but also to hear other experiences. It's really, really helpful. Like for us,
Is it only me, or
to be here to different cities in Buenos Aires, in Argentina? It's really, really helpful.
I think we lost you for the last 30 seconds, Milagros. I don't know if it was my internet or yours.
Oh, sorry, I think it was mine.
Yeah, can you repeat really quickly your last 30 seconds?
Not only to Yes, I wanted to say that work with different international organizations, as you guys at ICLEI, to see what other cities in the world are working on, but also to interact with local cities or parties, as we do, for example, in this case with Rosario, is really, really helpful to see what others are doing. But I think the key is working together as a government as a whole, interacting with others to see what others are doing, making the citizens a part of the diagnosis and solutions, and also just to work all together to make the better solutions to be targeted.
Thank you very much, Milagros. From my side, really quickly, being a former policymaker for my home city in Quito, Ecuador, and just to contribute to this conversation and to this particular question, looking at UN bodies or international organizations that work on specific topics and themes might be useful to bring in new pieces of information. Back in that time when I was in the city and the pandemic hit, and we were closing down the city, and we had to understand where the most vulnerable were located during that time. And even though we might have information around single mothers, for example, or female-led households and so on, we didn't have information on migrants and brothers and sisters coming from Venezuela in that particular case. And then reaching out to the UN agency that works with refugees really helped us provide the clarity on that particular group. So mapping out who's working on which sectors, who's collecting information, who's supporting central or local governments is also an entry door to get data sets and bring again light to places and to groups that are usually not mapped properly, where cities really need to have information on. Also, just want to mention Buenos Aires is part of one of the projects that is being implemented by ICLEI, the Urban Infrastructure Insurance Facility, which is about insurance, where data plays a key role. And you really need to have a good understanding of the risk and exposure to plan better where can you reduce the risk, what you should transfer or get an insurance for, and how much you need to retain. And when it comes to response capacities, for example, and responsiveness, which is what most cities are interested in this particular project, this type of data becomes critical. So the efforts that we did with participant cities to collect the data was quite an important one, which is basically a point to be put forward to cities all around, which is making an effort to collect data and having data on vulnerable groups is an advantage when you plan and if you want to manage and finance properly these risks. We are reaching the end of this session. We still have 5 minutes. I won't take long in the concluding remarks. Just want to see if anyone from our panelists would like to add any additional or final words. Maybe you can take 30 seconds to 1 minute if you want to. The opportunity is there. Otherwise, I can start closing. Then, in that case, I just would like to add one thing, which is related to data and governance. And I think this particular point becomes relevant and it's critical around the discussions and conversations that we've been having in this panel. And that is when we talk about knowledge creation and learning that needs to be continuous, reflexive, and participatory. We also need to look at reciprocity, transparency, and reproducibility. When my colleague Suzanne from the City of Bonn mentioned about or proposed this session, we at ICLEI found it really interesting and worth pursuing, because basically it's about making data sets available for everyone, so that these sets of data, together with others, can be better used in benefit not only to manage risks in or of cities and within cities, but also to understand the differentiated vulnerabilities and exposure in these cities' landscapes, but not only to manage risks, but also to understand the trajectory of these cities. Are things getting better or not? Are we effective in terms of providing the solutions that we need to provide? Are we really supporting the trajectory of a city to become more inclusive and to become more just and to become basically something that is for everyone? With that, I'd like to close. I would like to thank all of our panelists, Flavia, Carlo, Sara, Milagros, the people behind the scenes, Anina and Carol from our side, of course, Stefan and Suzanne. And I think we can take these 3 minutes back for ourselves, at least here in Germany. Enjoy a beautiful afternoon. And yeah, and to all the rest, enjoy your afternoon and your day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.